We're going to start 3 lines from the top, 4 lines from the top on Gimel. Gimel and Aleph. Okay, we've been learning in Meilah, first Mishnah, we learned about sacrifices that were not done perfectly. And we said that nevertheless there's Meilah. The only time there wouldn't be Meilah is if it became mutter for Kayanim to eat from. And then it gets messed up. Then there's no Meilah. Then we discussed the concept of Meilah Midrabanan. Now, we have a lot of things that we say, Lei Nanin, V'lei Mayalin. You're not supposed to have a Na, but there's no Meilah. That we always knew. But Ula introduced us to such a thing as Meilah Midrabanan. Then we discussed these things that we mentioned, a Machlikas Rabbi and Rabbi Yosef. If Alu, if they were brought up on the altar, are they taken off the altar? So Rabbi Yosef says yes, and Rabbi Yosef says that they're not taken off, and Rabbi says that they are taken off the altar. We said that was only a Machlikas and Rabbi Shimon. Then we discussed, is there such a thing as Meilah Midrabanan? We tried to prove that not. And then we asked about achatas. We said that there's Meilah Midrabanan by certain types of chatais. Once it's mesa, after it dies, there's Meilah, even after it dies Midrabanan. Today's Gemara starts with achatas shemesa miyispe Meilah. Is there such a thing as Meilah and achatas after it dies? So what we're going to do here is we're going to introduce words that sound very, very similar, and we're going to ask from this that we see that there is no Meilah midrabanan. Now the similar word is v'hatanan, but it was taught in the Mishnah chatois hamesais, chatois that have to be put to death. Why? Because the owner was already had a kapara, and these were left over. So those are chatois hamesais. So we're going to compare chatois hamesais to chatas hamesa, to a chatas that died. So it's very different. But meanwhile, in the question, it's a good question. It sounds to death, yeah. So what are the chatois hamesais? So I see in the Shita Mekabetzes, he brings
not put to death, they're left to die.
Left to die.
Okay.
Left to die. So, but it's different than a chatas that just died. So what is the chatois hamesais? So in the Shita Mekabetzes, it says simen v'timna. V'timna haisa pilegash, you know the pasuk. So v'timna stands for the Vlad Chatas, if the Chatas has an offspring. It's sort of in the Shechnisa Lefnim Taisvis. You go down 3 lines from that. Yeah, exactly what you think of us just before. Lower. Somewhere over there. The last word on the line is Vitimna, Siman Vitimna. So Vitimna is the Vlad Chatas, the Tmuras Chatas, the Mesu Ba'aleha, Niskapru Ba'aleyan, Ba'acher, and Avra Shanasa. That's the abbreviation for the Chamish Chatois Hamesais, Vitimna. Okay, so if I have Chatois Hamesais, or those are all Chatois that are not needed anymore. Really?
I just hit Shita Mekabetzes, and it just showed.
How do you hit the Shita?
Because in the notes it said Shita Mekabetzes. So you just, it links. It makes the class.
Oh wow, that's good. That's good. It popped up the Vitimna thing. So I never saw that Vitimna before. I never saw that.
His computer is genius.
Yeah.
Very smart computer. Yeah. But you know when I say call my wife, it never does anything.
Maybe that's smart. You said it's a smart computer.
And the money that goes to the Yamamelach, to the sea. Yeah, I know you're going to tell me. The Rambam.
No, that's not that. Yamamelach means Yamamaluach Mepeo.
I understand. I know.
Other things. No connection about what the Rambam said. It's quite nice.
Oh, come on. You can't leave us on a cliffhanger who don't know what the Rambam said about something. I don't know what you're talking
Rabbi
about.
Aaron has a discussion about the two places in the Rambam where one, it looks like when it says Yam HaMelech, it means Yam HaMaluach, which just means an ocean. It means salty water. And Yam HaMelech means the Dead Sea. So what is it referring to, right?
Yeah,
So,
this is something else.
So, why would money need to be thrown into the sea? That's because the person designated money for his chatas, and for whatever reason, it's not necessary anymore. Not that he designated a chatas, it's not necessary. He designated money for the chatas, and it's not needed anymore. Similar to the chatayis hamesus, those are chatayis that are needed anymore. So it says, Leinen and Vleimaylan. It says, you can't have
somebody who
anah.
finds that money could use it?
No.
How did they know it was what that guy thought?
Oh, that's another question. I don't know. But that's why you have to throw it into the sea.
It gets destroyed. That's the idea.
So Leinan and
Eats up
Vleimaylan.
the copper.
Light's wife spends it over there shopping.
The money was put for a chatas.
Yeah.
Okay.
Then
The
he
chatas
ended up
size.
getting another chatas.
Oh.
So that money
Goes
is
into
totally
the
not
kitchen.
necessary. You have to. It was sort of has this consecration for a specific chatas, and so you have to.
Specific chatas.
Yeah, so you have to throw it into the sea.
What happens if you're just going for Pesach or something? And
That's
you
what
don't
I'm
have
saying,
time
you
to
don't-
get it? Is it just saying you have to destroy it or specifically saying to the animal?
No, it just says destroy. It means to destroy it, but what type of destruction that no one was going to get a hold of it. So we have a problem here because it says Leinan and Vleimaylan. There is no hana, and over here it says that I'm sorry, it says there is no meila, and we just learned before in end of yesterday's Gemara that there is meila midrabanan. Here it says there's no meila by the chatais that die. Gemara says Amri say chatais hameisais. There's a difference. Chatais that are left to die b'chayein b'dilim minhain. Even while they're alive, people separate themselves from them because they know that these are going to be left to die. So there's no gezeira on them even after they die because no one's ever going to use them. Even while they were alive, no one would come close to them. However, those that are alive, that would have been brought as a chatas that just happened to die, those people don't separate themselves, so then you have to make a gezeira, and there is such a thing as milah midarabanan on this. Okay, that's a teretz. Esvei Rabbi Yosef l'Rabba. We're jumping back to yesterday's Gemara. Rabbi said that im alu yardu. Rabbi says yardu. And Rabbi says yardu. Rabbi says yardu. The way I remember it is because Rabbi was the Rosh Yeshiva for longer. And the Bachim come into the yeshiva that they got accepted. They weren't really supposed to get accepted. The question is, Imalu Yardu. Do you take him down? So Rabbi was the big experience. He says, no, Yardu. Rabbi Yosef, he was on the yeshiva for 2 years, Rabbi Yosef. He says, okay, let him stay. So, Rabbi Yosef asked a question now to Rabbi. And this question is going to be based on a build-up of 3 Mishnayos. So it goes like this: Chada migay chada v'chada migay chada. One from another one and another one from another one. This build-up, we're going to put these Mishnayos together. We're going to come out with a question. It says, "V'kulan ein metamim begadim abeis abliya umayalim behem chutz michatas saif she'asu amata k'maisa chatas saif l'shem chatas." That's the first one. What's happening over there is that the way a oif, if someone's bringing a bird, but it's oila saif or chata saif, that you need to do malika with the fingernail through the back of the neck. Now, if that's not a valid karban, then that would be considered a nevela, an animal that died without shchita. It's only because it's a karban that it's acceptable. Now, a kosher bird that dies without shchita is metame begadim abeis abliya. It means normally if you touch it, you become tummy. This is special halacha that a kosher bird that dies, you don't become tummy. It's not like a an animal that died. An animal that dies, if you touch it, it's in a veil, it gives off tumah. A kosher bird that dies, the only way it gives off tumah is if you swallow it. While you're swallowing it, the person becomes tummy and his clothing becomes tummy. So the question is, if there was some invalidity over here with this bird, should it make the person tummy? In other words, it was a karban, so it's not an avela, but there's a psul in the karban. So the malika was done correct, but then something happened. He sprinkles the blood in the wrong place, or he did the malika in the wrong place. No, so we said no. We said kulan ein metamim megadim. They don't make a person tamei.
What would even be? Sorry, what would even hava mean?
I mean, it would be if you did the malika. You're supposed to do the malika on the upper part of the mizbeach.
Why would it be tumah?
Oh, because it's an avela. No, because it's an avela.
Don't worry.
Because the bird becomes an avela because there was no shechita on the bird.
And if it dies,
An avela means a bird that dies without shechita. So here I'm doing malika.
But they say if you change the area of the malika, that's what caused it.
The area of the malika means instead of doing it on the floor, you did it on the mizbeach. Not the area on the neck.
That's what they mean by
Not the area on the neck. I'm sorry?
Is that what they mean by slaughtered in the south?
We're going to compare it to that in a moment. We're going to compare it to slaughtered in the south. Yeah.
What do they mean by in the south? Just somewhere else? Or?
Yeah. A holy karban, the kodesh kadashim karbanos are supposed to be slaughtered in the north. This, if it's slaughtered in the south of the Bais Hamikdash.
Okay.
So the first step is that we say over here that there is Meilah. There is Meilah on a karban that the malika was done in the wrong place. There is Meilah. We have Meilah in the Mishnah. We have Meilah in the Mishnah. So far, so good. Now, the next part of this is, the only exception to that would be Chatas Ha'if that was done correctly. There's no Meilah. Why is there no Meilah on a Chatas Ha'if?
Because it was never permissible to refine it.
No,
It was done in the wrong
that's
place,
the
so it was never
opposite.
permissible.
When it becomes permissible to a Kayan, then the Meilah goes off.
Becoming the test, right?
No, I thought the Rabbanan was that. The Rabbanan, there's times when if it was mutter to a kain, then it could still be kamila. So you could still have the law.
No. Once it's permissible to a Kayan, there's no Meilah. Those cases that we were talking about, Meilah Midirabanan, were because it was never permissible to a Kayan. Why over here was it only Midirabanan? Maybe it was similar to it just dying. Yeah, so the Chatas Ha'if is an example of that. The Chatas Ha'if that's done on the bottom, which is where it's supposed to be. So then there's no Meilah. Why? Because it's permissible to the Kainim. The Oila Sa'if that's done on the top of Tzugazant, even though that's where it belongs, there still is Meilah because it was never permissible to the Kain. Why? Because the Oila Sa'if is always burnt. The only exception of an eaten bird would be the Chata Sa'if, that has permissibility to the Kain. If it's done properly, then there's going to be no Meilah there. That's what we just said here. Uktani Yilavei, and it was learnt on this. Now we're up to the second Mishnah. Kol shi psula b'kodesh, eina metamem begadim ha'beis habliya. V'kol shalai ha'isa psula b'kodesh, metamem begadim ha'beis habliya. We make a distinction between psula b'kodesh and not. When did the psul take place? If the psul took place before it came to the temple, so then we say that the malika's no good. For example, it broke its leg was broken off or something, and it was puzzle already before. Then this becomes an avela. It's metame begadim ha'beis habliya. But if the whole invalidity takes place in the temple itself, so then it's considered if it's a ritual law that's being violated here, that's making it puzzle. So we say that malika is still valid, and it's not considered a nevela. Uktani, and it was also taught, kol shei psula b'kodesh. Anything that the invalidity took place in the temple itself. For example, the what we're talking about here, the malik is done on the wrong area, on the wrong upper part of the mizbeach, the lower part of the mizbeach, all of those things, which we said doesn't make it a nevela. Those things as well, im alu lo yerdu. If they're put on the altar, they don't come off the altar. This is Rabbi Yosef's claim. We're talking about psulei b'kodesh in our Mishnah. We're talking about the shechita was done on the south. That's a psulei b'kodesh. And we're saying that im alu lo yerdu. If it's brought on the altar, you don't take it down. That's Rabbi Yosef's opinion. It's a kasha on Rabbi. Tiyufta de Rabba, tiyufta. Tiyufta de Rabba? Question? Tiyufta. It's a question. Okay. The Gemara now says, V'ha de pligi ba Rabba v'Rabbi Yosef. This that we had a machlekes between Rabba and Rabbi Yosef, pshit leila Rabbi Lazar. I should show you on the charts. Yeah, pass me this book. So, I have Rabbi and Rabbi Yosef over here. Rabbi and Rabbi Yosef. And Rabbi Lazar is in Israel. Rabbi Lazar. So that's what's going on. This that we had that Rabbi and Rabbi Yosef have a question, but Rabbi Lazar doesn't have a question. We'll see. It's not so simple, but Dam Rabbi Lazar. Rabbi Lazar says, "Eilas bamas yachid shechnisa lefnim." What's happening here is we're dealing with this very specific time in history that people were allowed to bring karbanos on private altars. It was in between temples, in between Mishkan and temple, in between Shiloh and the Bais Hamikdash. So you were allowed to bring.
When it would go like from Givon to Shiloh to whatever, between those places.
I think between those places that was allowed.
Up to the Beit HaMikdash when it's built, then it's
And
done.
I think even during that time, even during Nevin Given, you're allowed. It was just when Shiloh and Bais Hamikdash it wasn't allowed. So during that time, someone designated an Eily that he's going to bring on a private altar. But then he says, "Oh, you know what? I'm going anyways to the Bais Hamikdash, not to the Bais Hamikdash, to the public altar. So I'm going to bring it over there." Or maybe they built the Bais Hamikdash in the interim. So what happens is, Kol Tua Mechitzas L'Chol Davar, it becomes a sacrifice of the Bais Hamikdash for all purposes. Now what that means is like this, that there's rules that apply to karbanos that don't apply on private altars. What side of the temple, where the different things, different details don't apply to private altars. But this karban was designated for a private altar. He's bringing it to the temple, so all the laws of the temple now take place for this. So Rabbi Lazar has a question. Boy Rabbi Lazar, Eilas bamas yachid shech nisa shenifsala. The shechita was done, but something became possible. Maybe Shechted B'darim on the south. Sounds like our Mishnah, right? And it says, Alu, if you brought it on the altar, Mahu Sheyerdu, do you take it off? Now the Gemara is saying, well, that's very similar to the discussion of Rabbi and Rabbi Yosef. Do you take it off the altar? Where Rabbi says that you do and Rabbi Yosef says you don't. The only difference is, Mida Kabayle Lechada, because his question is only about a Bamas Yachid that was brought to the Bais Hamikdash, Michlal, that would imply that the Idach Pshitale, it must be that if it would be a regular karban, he already knows the answer. If it would be a karban from the Bais Hamikdash, that question he didn't ask. His whole question was one that was designated for a private altar. Why didn't he ask the simple question? Because he must know the answer to the simple question. Ikar Rabbi Yosef. We don't know what his answer is, but it must be that it was obvious to him what it was. You follow? So what we're trying to say here is that Rabbi Lazar does not have the question of Rabbi and Rabbi Yosef. We have a question what Rabbi Lazar holds. Does he hold like Rabbi or Rabbi Yosef? But Rabbi Lazar himself must have held like one. The Gemara says, no. He's actually asking both questions. And it's not because of one, it's not because he knows the answer that he only asked it in a complicated way. He's asking it a complicated way because he has a question on the first one as well. So Adkan lekama Rabba Hasam im alu yerd. Why does Rabba say if someone consecrates an animal to bring to the temple, and in the temple he makes it invalid by slaughtering it on the south, then he brings it up on the altar anyway, even though it was invalid. And Rabba says that you take it down. Maybe the reason for that is mechitza ketikna pasla, because it was consecrated properly to bring to the temple. So this has the full holiness. So therefore over here you have to take it down. But shalai ketikna, but if you consecrated it not for the temple, you consecrated it to bring it on a private altar, maybe like pasla. Maybe Rabbi would agree that this doesn't have all the laws mamish of the temple. It was never consecrated for the temple. Maybe it still retains some of the laws for outside the temple where you don't have these restrictions. So he has a kasha according to Rabbi. Or maybe the opposite. Even according to Rabbi Yosef, that says that normally you don't take it down if it was consecrated for the temple. Mechitza ketikna kalta. Because it was consecrated for the temple and it was brought for the temple, so it gets absorbed by the temple, it has the full holiness. But shleiketikna, you were not supposed to be here anyway, and now you're even bringing it up. So like kalta, it doesn't absorb it. So teku. So he leaves off with the question. And as we thought that maybe Rabbi Lazar knew either like he had a definite answer, either like Rabbi or Rabbi Yosef. In the end, we're saying that his question is based on his first question is, do we go like Rabbi or Rabbi Yosef? And then, so he has the first question, and then the second question is based on that. So it's a double question. Amar of Gidl Amar Rav.
Even if the holy temple is there, how can you even think that there's something for an outside temple, for an outside?
I was using the word temple. I meant to use the word public altar, not temple. Public altar. Even though they had a public altar, whether it was Noiv or Givain or whatever.
You mean like in,
in between Shiloh and the Bais Hamikdash.
Right, okay.
So they had public altars, but they also had private altars. So
then you could have both, okay.
Or maybe what happened here was he consecrated it for the private altar. Then the Bais Hamikdash was built, and he brings the animal in the Bais Hamikdash.
That short time period.
Right. Maybe that's what it means.
I'm trying to think. How can you have designate for one place and then bring it to the
Right.
You can't bring it
Right.
anywhere
That was the
else.
time when it was forbidden.
Right.
Okay, Rav Gidl Amar Rav. This is Rav. And Rav Gidl should be here, but I don't know if he is. Yeah, Rav Gidl is right there. It's a little. Rav Gidl sounds like he's growing up.
Little Gidl thing.
Little Gidl. It's interesting because the names sound like their size. Rav, Zeira, right? Gidl. They sound like sizes.
It sounds like Gidl would be Lashon Saginar.
Uh-huh.
Probably
Interesting.
wasn't big in
Uh-huh.
My Gidl.
sarcastic.
I'm Rav Gidl Amar Rav. Rav Gidl says the name of Rav. Zrika Spigel Eina Maitzmi De Mila Bekachi Kadashim Veina Mevil De Mila Bekachim Kalim. What's happening here is we're going to see something slightly different than what we're used to. Usually we understood that if someone does shechita and he has the wrong intention by the shechita, that he's going to sprinkle the blood or eat the sacrifice or burn the limbs out of the appropriate time, that's pigel. That's what we always understood. We're introducing something new. Here we're saying that yes, the shechita was done with intention for pigel, but the zrika also was. Zrika's pigel, he's sprinkling the blood, so that's not going to take it out of Meilah by Kachi Kadashim, because what would take something out of Meilah? Once the zrika's done, it becomes permissible for the Kayanim to eat, and it's not Meilah anymore. But over here, because the sprinkling of the blood was pigel, so it doesn't become permissible for the Kayanim to eat, so it retains its old status of Meilah. It never becomes permitted to the Kayanim. So that's the first statement.
What do you mean this Rico was pigel?
While he's sprinkling the blood, he has intention to eat the meat or to burn the limbs after the time.
Why can't you just say it was the Zrika of a pigel?
It is the Zrika of a pigel. Because by the
Why do
Zrika,
you
he
have
also...
you're kind of making a pigel twice.
Yeah, that's the new thing that we're getting over here that you'll see in a moment.
How can you even have the intention of eating it after the time, though? I mean...
You're not allowed.
Yeah, how can you even have that intention?
We've seen a lot of crazier things in the Gemara.
I mean, I understand. I guess,
I'm sorry.
like the Roman times, I guess,
Long enough.
Right.
you know, they didn't have that much. This, that. I had nothing in the house. I'm going to take a little home with me. Nobody will know. In other words, the priests were not who they should have been.
Right. Could be.
But to me, that almost renders the whole discussion. It's going to happen anyway. It's whether you can derive benefit, can't. They're doing it anyway. They're performing all these averas.
Right.
What's the difference?
So I'll tell you two things. One thing is that not necessarily was the time so difficult. Not necessarily we're talking about those Roman times where the whole thing was corrupt. Could be we're talking about other times, even in the times of Moshe Rabbeinu, and it could be that someone had the wrong thought. And also, even during the times of the Romans, that it was corrupt. Nevertheless, every detail matters. Doesn't mean that it's all corrupt anyway. Doesn't matter.
It also says that God does not count for a Jew. God does not count our thoughts, but our actions.
That doesn't apply to kachim, the sacrifices.
Really?
Yeah. Or Avodah Zarah.
Yeah, really.
Or Avodah Zarah. Or Avodah Zarah. Okay, so Yosef Abaya. I'm sorry, I didn't explain the second half of Rav Gidl. We explained the first half.
So is this meant to be a kasha?
One second, not yet. Rav Gidl made two statements. First statement is that it's kachim, but there was a pigel that was done, so it doesn't become mutter for the kayanim to eat, and so therefore it's still me'ilah. His second statement is that kachim kalim are normally owned by the owner, and there's no me'ilah by kachim kalim until the blood is sprinkled, and then there's me'ilah on those limbs that are supposed to be burnt on the altar. Before there was no me'ilah. There was no rules of me'ilah on the animal because it's still the person was meant to bring the sacrifice, like a shlamim, something that was going to be his sacrifice. Once the blood is sprinkled, then those limbs that go on the altar, there's me'ilah that would apply to those limbs if someone would have personal use from those limbs. Because the consecration isn't so complete, it's not as holy that the laws of me'ilah apply by a kachim kalim sacrifice. Kachim kalim, he takes it into it's going to be eaten in Yerushalayim. It's not eaten in the courtyard of the temple. It's more of like a personal sacrifice.
Excuse me, I'm really quite confused. What we learned in the Mishnah, was that if there's a mistake involving the mistake, one of the four things in Shkita is not done right, or it's done in the wrong place, or the wrong time. Now Me'ilah applies. It's a problem for whoever wants to use it.
Right.
But once it's done, the four things were done right, in the right place, in the right time. Now you're saying there's still a problem?
Now there's going to be me'ilah
We're saying there's still a problem?
on the limbs, on the organs that go on the altar.
How? Everything was done right.
No.
What can
So-
be the problem?
No, the problem is that if you have personal use from something that belongs to God, so that's a violation of Meilah. So I know now the sacrifice gets divided up. Some goes to the Kohanim and some goes on the altar. But the parts that go on the altar but now those laws
so
of Meilah are going to apply.
It goes beyond what was discussed in the mission.
Yeah.
If the use of a properly sacrificed animal is not correct, Meilah also applies? Is that what it's saying?
Meilah applies to an improperly sacrificed animal rabbinically on the meats, on the part that should be eaten. That's what we're learning in the Mishnah. That's what we learned in the Mishnah.
The only one actually that can do that is the Kohen, right?
Probably.
Okay, so it was sacrificed properly, right time, right place. I'm not sure this is worth a trophy. We'll hold that in abeyance for a moment. And now somebody wants to eat it who shouldn't eat it. Is that what we're talking about? How does this pasul come into play once everything is done?
Yeah, it's the carbon is puzzle
Because
it was sacrificed in the wrong place.
well, I'm positing. I thought the Gemara here is saying that all four aspects were done correctly, right time and right place, and it still becoming possible